Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership. And today we have our book club episode, and we're going to be talking about the book Comfortable with Complexity by Jean-Francois Lavallee. Did I get that right?
I think so.
That's
how I would say it.
I was like, I have no idea. I didn't listen. I should have listened to the TED Talk. That probably would have taken care of it. But so that was my best French impression. And so if you speak French, you know how to say it. If not,
We did our best.
So, Robert, this was your selection. Tell us why you selected this book before we get into talking about the book.
Well, you know how I am. I find a subject that I'm interested in or something that appeals to me, and I go, oh, wow, that's great. Let me do some research on it. I find a book, and I'm like, that's great, but there are some parts of it that are a little bit murky to me. I don't understand. And then I find another book, and then I find another book. So look behind me, you can see. But this was something that I found when I was studying VUCA, and that is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's something that came up a lot when I was working with David Peterson, former coach at Google. And he was talking about this and talking about why it's so important for us as coaches to help our clients deal with complexity, because complexity is all around us. And so I did some research, I found this book, and I was just amazed at how the author was able to take I'm going to be very punny here, a very complex issue and make it simple. So and these are, the pun is, these are the domains of complexity frameworks. And so he started this work, or really devising this framework, because he was already using it with his clients. He's a corporate coach, and he saw that it was helping people. And he thought, you know what if I wrote a book that helped many more people with this and helped them deal with complexity, because complexity is all around us.
Okay. All right. And I loved your pun, complexity and simple, because we're all about simple here. So.
Absolutely.
It was a twofer.
A twofer.
So you started a little bit about why he created it, his clients already doing this work. Talk a little bit more about that and why it's helpful ultimately for leaders, everybody really, but leaders in particular, to master this concept of complexity and being comfortable with, and not just complexity, but the uncertainty that comes along with it.
Well, I don't, we don't spoil the book for people. We want to get people to buy the book. But yes, what I will tell you here is that usually the main issue, and this is something that I'm sure he's seen and something I've seen and something that the book really addresses, is the fact that a lot of times we try to handle a complex problem from the simple domain. We look at it as we've seen this in our lives, right? So if we look at a complex problem, raising a child, you usually get people that go, oh, if you're having an issue with raising your child, you're having an issue with, their attitude or something, their behavior, what they're doing, you probably have a friend that say, oh, it's simple, you just do this. Right. And that is really an example of a leader trying to handle a complex problem, but looking at it through the lens of simplicity. It just doesn't work. And so this is something that he addresses in the book, and that's something that I found very attractive.
When you think about, I don't know, traditional leadership models, right? How does, yes, we don't want to spoil it, but I think when one thinks about complexity, if it scares you enough to not get it, we can get the book and read it. We need to just break it down enough to say, I found it to be an easy read,
It
right?
really
And
was.
the language is simple. The language is simple. And the examples are relatable. Even with him starting off with math grids and x and y axes, things like which speaks to my geekiness.
Right. Well, the thing that I think is really interesting, and the thing that the author does so well is he takes the framework and he overlays typical business problems over it. So you can say, okay, here's how I would use, here's how I would find a solution if something was in the complex realm. Here's how I'd find a solution if something was in the complicated realm. And here's how I would find a solution for something that was in the simple realm. And so it gives you a framework to overlay and look at your problems that you're encountering. And I don't want to just say problems, I want to say endeavors too, because you may be trying to create something. And that's a common misconception of these complexity frameworks, that we're only dealing with problems. We're really not all the time dealing with problems. Sometimes we're dealing with, I'm trying to create something that other people have not been able to create. That's an endeavor, I'll call it. And it's a complex endeavor. So he gives you a framework where you can overlay those things and look at how you could use that in your organization when you're developing something. And I'm going to talk about that later. That's like the last bit of what I'm going to discuss today. And then you can look at it as how it affects or impacts other aspects of your business, such as recruiting and things like that. So I thought that was, and I hadn't seen that before. And I've read several books on complexity. And this was the first one that really took it and applied it and gave the first that I know of that applied, really concrete business examples to it. There are others out there, but I really liked how he did it.
So let me ask you a personal question about
Uh-oh.
this. So no, so you said, right, that something strikes an interest in you, and then you sort of start down this path.
Mhm.
Won't call it a rabbit hole, but you start down this path of doing more and more research. What was the original sort of impetus for studying complexity? Was there something happening in your life or in your work that led you to this, or you just read something and said, I want to learn more about this?
Two things happened. That's a really great question, Whitney. Two things happened. When I was studying with David Peterson and David Goldsmith, and they were talking about complexity, I realized complexity it's everywhere. It's everywhere. The coronavirus is an example of a complex situation, which, by the way, is still ongoing. I know we've relegated it to the simple domain, right? We've relegated it to the simple. Oh yeah, you get a shot for that, but there are mutations, right? So there is the complex portion of that we tend to forget about. That was one thing, and then I started looking at, oh wow. So when and the other thing is we typically relegate, and I am guilty of this too, relegating complex problems to things in the environment, right? Things outside of the home, things outside of the business. But those things have an effect on us, and they make our lives and the things that we deal with complex. That was the first thing. So that sent me down the rabbit hole to find the original complexity framework, which is called Kinevin, which is created by David Snowden. And I found that, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. You know me, I'm like, looking at that. But there were certain parts of that I found to be not, I don't want to say confusing, but based on my level of understanding at the time, I found them to be a bit murky for me. And so I would do additional research to see if there were things that explain those concepts that I didn't understand a little more simply. And so I started doing that, and then I found this book, and I was like, "This is perfect." And he references David Snowden's work several times in this book, so I knew I was in the right path.
You know, when I think about complexity, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, and certainly from Jean-Francois's perspective, if I am off track. But complexity, in at least in my mind, doesn't mean hard. It simply means that it contains variables known and unknown, and sometimes it's about the unpacking of that helps us in the problem solving realm, right? And I think what scares a lot of people is that they think that something that simply may be complex, they think it's hard, and we don't want to take on hard things, right? Or take the time to sort of unpack things. And going back to your point about using a simple framework, right? We want to use the simple framework, a model that we've applied to something else, to something that's complex, where if you break it down, maybe you could do that on the component parts, but not to the big system overall.
Right. I would just make one adjustment to what you said. Complex things are unknown unknowns, right?
Unknown. Mm-hmm.
Right. Those are things that you don't know that you don't know. You may be thrust in the middle of them, or you may be interested in them, and you're trying to figure them out. I think you're right, though. But the unknown unknowns are what scares people.
Yeah.
So just this, we could use the example of coronavirus. When coronavirus first hit, it was pandemonium. People were freaking out. There were people that denied it. That was them going to the simple domain. It's this is a hoax. But
was that a pun too?
Was
pandemonium, pandemic? Go on.
Could be.
I'm so sorry.
Could be. It was. I was trying not to say chaotic, right? Because it's complex. I'm trying to keep it in the domains. But also, it's same thing happened when AIDS hit years ago. The same type of confusion, and in some cases denial about what it was. In some cases, terror. Right. So, I remember when that first happened, I'm dating myself, they thought it was Legionnaire's disease. They didn't know what it was. So they were, oh, it's just this. And they turned out to be something completely different. So I think that's what catches people is it's the unknown unknowns.
The unknown unknowns, which is uncertainty, right? And our sort of fear of uncertainty, because we have this human need for certainty. We want things to be stable. We want them to speaking of the pandemic, we want things to remain the same. And if they don't remain the same, we want to get them back to the way they were as quickly as possible, where our world and life is constantly changing, right? And we have unknowns every single day. What happens 5 minutes from now is unknown and uncertain. We have tricked ourselves into thinking that it's going to be the same as it was. And in leadership and business, that's not a good thing when you are operating in a world where there's so many external factors and variables coming at you that you need to be able to navigate and maneuver to stay relevant. We've talked about this, on other episodes about, businesses that are no more because they were not navigating the landscape, the uncertain landscape, and they wanted to hold on to what was.
Absolutely, and that's what we're hardwired to do. That we want certainty. We want things to be simple. Things are not always simple. We so much so that, like I said before, we'll see something that's complex or even chaotic, and we'll try to say, oh, it's just this. And when you live in that, I'll say delusional space, it can cause lots of terrible repercussions down the line. And we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen with parenting. We've seen it happen with social issues. We've seen it happening with governmental issues. We see it happening. It's happening today. The thing that I want to also say is not only are things changing faster than ever, different things are changing faster than ever. And so that's why it's really important to understand or be comfortable with complexity.
So where are you in your personal life, or your business life, right? You're an entrepreneur. Where are you in your, if we were to put this on a scale,
Oh,
comfortability?
Of comfortability or complexity?
Take your both your comfortability with complexity. I know you're a complex guy. That's a off the chart.
Also known as weird, but yes. So
no,
my business is, I'm definitely working in the complex realm. I am adding some things I hope to do this year, and I've been, which henceforth all the research, really working on expanding the value that I bring to my clients. Interestingly enough, one of my goals for 2023 was to introduce the complexity framework to my clients, and I've done that, and they were like, "This is amazing." And so I'm always looking to do that. So I'm going into the complex realm this year with some other things that I hope to bring to my clients. And am I comfortable with it? I'm getting more comfortable with it. When I first started out, it was, how I work. I look at something and go, "Oh, that's great. Let me do more research." And, "Oh, this book exists. Let me get that book. Did that answer the question? It did partially. Let me go further so that I have the complete answer to that question." And that's how I do my work. And that helps me, because you've heard me say this, and you said it yourself. The real test of someone's knowledge is whether they can explain something in a very simple way. And that's what I try to do with my clients. So I try to take those complex issues or those things that I think are complex, and create a framework that will help them in a way that I could explain to them, and they can understand it.
Okay. All right. I accept that answer. So what are the things that you would, without giving away the store, what are the messages that you'd really like to leave the audience with in terms of what they can take away from the book?
All right, let's talk about the framework and why. Okay. I think it's really brilliant. So let me see if this works here. So yeah, this is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. Does that work?
You need to do the other side.
Okay, this is the x-axis. This is the y-axis. That works?
Yes.
Okay, that works. Okay, so here on the x-axis we have interactions, and these are the pieces of your problem or your endeavor. Remember, we're not just going to call it problems in terms of complexity. So it's the number of people that are involved. It's the number of material that are involved. It's the number of forces that are involved, or projects that are involved in the overall endeavor. Of course, the more of those pieces that you have, here, it's going to be more complex. And over here, you have uncertainty. You could have a few uncertain parts of that, or it can be very uncertain. So here at the origin, here's my little math thing. This is probably the extent of my math. At the origin of the XY axis, you have the simple domain. And the further you go out away from the axis, you have, so right after simple, you have complicated. And right after complicated, you have complex. And here, way out here, you have chaotic. So the further you go away from the origin of that XY axis, you're going to move away from simple to chaotic. And that's one of the things that I really loved about it. If you're familiar with those of you who are familiar with the Cynefin framework, it just puts them in a 2x2 axis, a 2x2 framework. And so it really doesn't make it very linear like that. And that's what I liked about how he did it. And so,
go ahead.
And I was going to talk about the components of, or so I should say, the domains, each domain, what makes them up. But we can pause right here and you can ask the question.
No, go ahead. I don't have a question.
So we'll take a look at it. If we're looking at that, and we know that the simple domain is here, and the further we go out, the further away we move from simple. Simple problems or endeavors are those things that are understandable, they're repeatable, they are what's the word I'm trying? Minimal and accessible, right? Those are things, the pieces that you need for them are readily available to you. And what he does is he takes just a verb. The Cynefin framework uses three words here. He just takes one word, one verb, and he puts it here. So the verb for that is to categorize them. You categorize them. You can categorize them because they're familiar to you. The example he uses is you wake up in the morning and you're thirsty, you have a dry throat. This is a simple problem. People go to the refrigerator, they open their refrigerator, they pull out a bottle of water, to crack it open, take a drink, put the cap back on, put it back in. It's a simple solution to a simple problem. These are things that you've seen hundreds or maybe even thousands of times. One of the things that I like to say about simple problems or endeavors is, even if you haven't done it yourself, you can probably figure it out because you've seen other people do it. Okay.
No, that makes sense. And so in terms of this sort of taking the complex and keeping and keeping from superimposing the simple solution that they come with, how does that work? How does the framework address, or how does the framework address that situation?
One of the things that I love about this framework is it gives you the descriptions of each domain. So if things are, like I said, if they're understandable, if they're repeatable, if they're minimal, the parts of them are minimal and accessible, then you're dealing with something in the simple domain. Think about like raising a child. Right? The parts are not minimal and accessible because you don't know the tools you need to raise a child. You may think you do, but every child is different because every person is different. So right off the bat, you're not dealing with, is it understandable? No, children aren't. You hear people say it all the time. I don't understand why this child is crying so much. It's in the language that people use. So right off the bat, it's not a simple problem. So someone coming to you and saying, okay, you just do this, it probably isn't going to work. So it's in the description of each domain that what type of problem or endeavor, I will say, that you're dealing with at the moment.
And so how do leaders put this into place, though? And why should, you've talked in general about this, but why is this important for leadership?
It's important for leadership because it gives you a framework to look at how you are conducting your business on a technical level and on an interpersonal level. I'm going to get to that. That's like my last example. But
okay.
One of the things that he talks about is how you can use it to actually recruit for your organization by looking at the types of questions that you use when you are interviewing people, because that person, you want to find out if that person is comfortable working in certain domains, because that certain parts of your organization are clearly positioned in that domain. And so as a spoiler, I'll say research and development. So you research and development, you have research and development over here, they're dealing with something that's complex. If you have a company that's trying to come up with a novel solution to a long-standing problem, you need people there that are really comfortable working with things that are dynamic and persistent, these types of things that are changing all the time, so they can come up with a solution to those things. And so you're not going to take somebody who clearly has demonstrated that they work very well in the simple domain and say, okay, I'm going to send you in
Mm-hmm.
research and development to go work in this department, I can almost guarantee that that person will be looking for a new job within the first month they're there. And this is a common thing that leaders do. They don't look at, the I don't want to say personality profile, but it basically is of the person that they are sending to a particular area to do work. And a lot of leaders typically think that, well, this person was really good at this. Let me send that person over here and so they can handle this problem. And then they are really baffled as to why it didn't work out. So this gives also leaders a framework to look at the individuals that are on their team as well.
Okay. All right. Where do you want to go next?
Let's go to the complicated realm.
Okay.
So we're moving my crazy finger, X, Y axis here. So we're moving further away from the origin point to the complicated realm. The complicated realm is very interesting because the complicated realm are those types of problems that you can envision the endpoint. You can envision the solution,
Mm-hmm.
right? They usually have one viable solution. They're usually organized and structured, but there are pockets of unknown. There are certain areas there that you don't know about. So my example here is fixing a leak in your kitchen, under your kitchen sink, right? You see there's a leak there. There is, it's organized and it's structured. There's pipes that are connected to pipes that how it works. The water goes down there, but you can't figure it out. And so usually when you have these types of things, and here's another way it affects leadership. Leadership here, the verb you use is to analyze. You analyze the situation. So you can analyze the situation. But when you hit those pockets of unknowns, what you can do is you can call an expert. So many times, this is where we as coaches and consultants get involved, is we get involved in the complicated realm. There are many parts involved in this. There are pockets of unknown, and it's our job to help those unknowns become clear to the people that we are working with. And so that's the complicated realm. And so let's stop there. Any questions about that one?
No.
Yeah, it's pretty clear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then we're moving further away from that origin point, and we get to the complex realm. Complex realm, here, these types of problems and endeavors they're not predictable. There are several viable solutions, interdependent parts to them. So the interdependent parts that you froze for a minute, so it made me little, and they're dynamic and persistent. So these are the things that are changing. And the example here I use several times, raising a child here, but addressing homelessness is another complex issue that a lot of times people come at it from a very simple domain, and they wonder why it isn't working. You're dealing with quite possibly mental health issues. You're dealing with economic issues. You're dealing with global or macroeconomic issues. You're dealing with social issues. You're dealing with people's attitudes toward homelessness. When
Right.
you put a homeless shelter in their neighborhood, so it's a complex issue that a lot of times people try to force into the simple domain, and it just doesn't work. So that's my examples for that. And then last, and probably the easiest to understand, is the chaotic. These are unknowable unknowns. These are things that are, unpredictable, and they don't have a discernible pattern. And so the example I use here is a fire. And the verb here, oh, by the way, the verb for a complex is probe. And I'll go back to that because that's really the crux of our program today. But the verb for chaotic is to act. If there's a fire, you're not going to categorize it and be like, okay, what type of fire is this? You're not going to start analyzing it because you're not outside of the fire. It's happening around you. You're not going to probe. You're going to act. You're going to act. You're going to do something, or you should act, right? Whether it's open up a window, maybe not open up a window, get low on the floor, touch the door, see if it's hot. You want to act in some way. And that's an example that people have used. using my research and development example before, your firemen have done a lot of research and development for these types of issues, and they have brought it down to us. So okay, get low on the floor. They've done all that stuff after years and years and years and years of experience and research. So those are the examples of the 4 domains and the components of them. And really, like I said, the key to understanding what domain you're in is using the description that he lays out very, very well in the book.
Okay, I love that, and the framework, that, no pun intended, but the framework is simple, right? It makes it easy to understand the various situations, the various what he calls interactions, right? The kinds of interactions that you can have.
Absolutely. And so, I want to just wrap up by talking about how leaders give. I gave a little trailer of that, a preview of that. But one of the great and really I just thought was just fantastic examples that he gives in the book is, you're trying to create something, and you have a company, you're trying to create something, and you start with, research and development, clearly in the complex realm. The people there, you want to create, and what the term that we use when we deal with complexity are safe to fail experiments. You want to create safe to fail experiments. So when you're dealing with a complex issue, you want to create an experiment that if something goes off the rails, it's not going to blow the whole thing up, right? And if that works, you move forward and you create another safe to fail experiment. That works, you go move forward, you create another safe to fail experiment. If that doesn't work, you go back and you reverse engineer what went wrong, where did it go wrong. So it also helps when you think about, root cause analysis or any kind of problem solving framework there as well. So that's where you have that's where those folks would be positioned in your company. You're trying to create something, or where that part of that endeavor would be. Then the second part of that endeavor is production. So your research and development people have solved the problem. They've created the prototype of that product that you're eventually hoping to roll out. Then you go to production. These are the people that are going to work in the complicated realm. They're looking at that. They're finding the organization and the structure of it. They're putting those pieces together in a way that will be understandable. They're using engineers to do that. Those are your experts that you will call when there's a service issue, right? And so you clearly put those people in the complicated realm. It goes down to operations, your marketing and sales people. Those are the people that have a process that works over and over again, that they use over and over again to market and sell your product so that people can understand it. They can encourage, those transactions that are going to bring money into your organization. They're going to be able to explain it in a way that makes sense to people because they're working in the simple domain. Mm-hmm. And so let's just stop there, and then we'll talk about the last part of that.
I'm like listening to you. I was like, if I had a professor like you, I was in college, right? I'm just like listening, and it's fascinating. And I understand why you follow these paths.
Well, yeah, because I've had these moments in my life where people ask me a question. I'm like, the knowledge was all here, but it wasn't in a way that I could clearly explain it to them. So that, so you have the conversation and you leave that conversation and you go, that didn't go as well as I'm smarter than I appeared to that person. And they go, yeah, I got it. And you're thinking they really didn't get it.
You don't got it. You don't got it.
So that's why I started doing this. And, it can be expensive, but, I go to thrift books. So I get my books used. But it helps me really dig into a subject so I can understand it and then talk about it in a way. And the other part of the process is doing these programs. Yeah. This helps because I have to be able to look at what I'm saying and think, is it going to be clear enough for people to understand where I'm coming from?
And it absolutely is. I think you have articulated it in a way that is helpful, that's understandable, but makes one want to actually get the book, used or not, on on an electronic device or not, right? But to read it, because it's easy to see how this could be helpful, right, in both your business, in your role as a leader, in your life, right, in your other relationships. And that was another thing that I found helpful, is that you can have the conversation, or the author could explain things using business scenarios, but in reality, and going back to sort of our concept about the simple leadership method, right, is that the way to become a better leader is to be a better version of yourself. And if you can see how adopting this approach in the framework in your personal life, in your life, then you can see how you can extrapolate that and make it applicable in business as well. And when we can learn lessons that serve the other purpose, and I'm going to make it binary, it is, life really isn't.
Right.
But let's make it binary, work life, right? And you can see how lessons in your work serve your life and lessons in your life serve your work. Then you've got an integration and a harmony there that helps you to navigate both worlds more effectively.
Absolutely. And Whitney, one of the things that the other thing that appealed to me is, and this is a personal thing, prior to I like frameworks because they help me in my personal life as well as my business life, my professional life. But prior to finding these frameworks, I was just kind of like floating around like, oh, does this work? No, this is awful. Let me just not think about that anymore. And that was just my way of doing it. My way of dealing with it was just it doesn't exist, right? And of course, it didn't work.
And it's helpful. And that's such a good point, Robert, because I feel like we think that we have to figure it all out ourselves. And a lot of it, if not most of it, has been figured out by someone, at least to varying degrees. And you can start sort of from a different place, right? So go as far as other people have figured things out, identified solutions, created frameworks, right? Go as far as those are, and then add on to that.
Correct.
Right? You don't have to start at zero when there are solutions available to you, frameworks, etc., available to you at 100. Start at 100 and then go beyond that.
Absolutely.
And if we could stop trying to solve the things that have already been solved, then we can put our time and attention on the things that have been solved in our life, in our business, in our relationships, as it relates to being a leader. What can we do to move the ball forward on being a better leader? There is such a wide universe of tools and resources and strategies already available. There really is no excuse for not being the best leader that you can be with all that we have available. You just have to avail yourself of what's out there and then add on to that.
That's a really great point. And it really reminds me of, I was on a panel a couple of years ago as a guest, and they asked me a question about, what can leaders do to be better if they find themselves thrust into these situations? And I said, what amazes me is how many people get put into a leadership position and they think that the only thing they need is their title to help them move forward, and they won't even crack open a book. They don't even think to open a book. By the way, I did buy this full price, okay? This was not a thrift book. I got this on Amazon full price. That's a note to the author. I paid full price for this book. But They won't even open a book. That is probably and we talked about it on the show. That's one of the most cost-effective things that
Right.
you can do. And here's another thing. I've had an exchange with this author, and you know me. When I get a book that I like, I immediately reach out to the author and it's like, hey, I have a question about this. How can I use it? A lot of these people they're willing to interact with you and to share their ideas because they want their work to live in other people. They want to see it grow. They want to see it helpful to you so you can recommend it to other people. I'm guessing that's what they want. I'm not trying to put thoughts and ideas or words in other people's mouths, but you know, I dare say that I've only, out of all the authors that I've all the books that I've read and the authors I've written out to, I've only had two that did not get back to me. Only two. And you look behind you, look behind me, and you see all these books. So you know that these are people that are willing to share their knowledge,
Yeah.
to deepen the knowledge that they've given to you. If you just reach out to them and ask, I'm sure they wouldn't like you to have them on speed dial, but but they will interact with you. I dare say so.
So I just want to say that was the reason that we decided to do this book club, right? To have, excuse me, to have a monthly recommendation of different books that you could read, because of so many people get a position, or promoted into a position, and there is, and I'm talking to these managers and leaders every week in trainings, that you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
And there is a sense that I was promoted. They think I know what I'm doing. I need to put on this facade of knowing what I'm doing, rather than I don't know what I don't know. Let me just start somewhere, right? And you don't have to solve all the things that you don't know right now, right? Just pick one thing. What one thing would you like to make some inroads on, right? And start there. A book. Books are relatively inexpensive, right? They are a low there's a low barrier to entry. YouTube, right? If you're watching us on YouTube or on LinkedIn, or for those of you on Facebook, right? Looking for content that addresses an aspect that you've identified that needs some addressing, right? You don't have to solve everything all at once, and you don't have to let the fact that you don't know something keep you from being willing to learn new things. One of the, we've talked about this, leaders are readers. They are also lifelong learners, right? And here's an opportunity, right, every month to pick a book. And so whether it's a book that we've recommended and have summarized here on the State of Leadership, or if it is a book that you walk down the street and it's in one of those little boxes.
Yeah.
It's in the little free library, and
Right.
it catches your attention. It doesn't matter. Just, start somewhere, and then let the curiosity of what you're learning expand and take you to the next place, right? And as you master a particular area that you've identified, then you can move on to the next one, and be okay with that. Be okay with that. And the other thing I would say is get your employer, if you're a leader in an organization, or you're part of a team in an organization that has a budget for professional development, Have some of how you spend those resources, have it be books, right? Build a library, because it will not only benefit you, it becomes a resource that's available to members of your team, right? And so books are a great way of doing that. We're going to, I hadn't talked to Robert about this. I hope we'll continue to do this in the new year. We'll select 12 new books that we will unveil, and you can read them along with us month by month next year. So final thoughts on the book or anything else before we wrap up?
I think final thoughts on the book is get it, read it, apply it. One of the things that he says in his book, he says, this is a framework that I created, but don't use it blindly. Take it, use it, customize it, fit it into how it makes, it's understandable to you. And the last thing that I want to say is, as a leader, one leader to another, there are 3 words that will significantly reduce your anxiety. I don't know. Those 3 words are huge. Don't have to know everything.
You don't have to. You don't have to. I want to just reiterate, and let me see if I can find this quickly. I don't know why this is happening.
Uh-oh.
I'm looking for our list. I just wanted to go through the list of the 12 books that we had this year, and I'm pulling up the drive and it says the file is empty. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I don't have it readily available, and I hadn't thought ahead of time to actually put that together. So this is what happens when you record live and you don't edit. So you get what you get, right?
That's true.
That's one of the benefits, or not. So, but I will take that list and put it in the notes or the announcement for this episode. And then you can look at the books that we read for 2023. We'll put together a new list for 2024. We hope you will join us for that journey. Robert, if someone wanted to reach out to you and work with you, how would they get in touch with you?
They can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com. That's my direct email, or they can go to the website, which is Robert Hilliard Coaching, and look for the form there. It's contact us, the contact me form, and then you can fill out what you want to talk to me about. Hopefully it's a complex issue. I love helping people with those things. So bring me your difficult, gnarly, sticky issues, and then we can set up a time where we can do a discovery call.
Awesome. And if you want to connect with me, shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. You can make a request there for a session with me, and there are a couple of ebooks available, one on your health, one on being a better leader and boss, and then one on boundaries. Saying no.
That's especially important at this time of year.
Saying no, exactly. And so just a reminder, this is the book that we covered in this episode, Comfortable with Complexity by Jean-Francois Lavallee. And so, as Robert said, get it, read it, apply it. I like it. Get it, read it, apply it. Gra. Gra. Get it, read it, apply it. And so thank you. Thank you. This is airing the original episode of this airs the week after Christmas. So it's between Christmas and New Year's. So we hope you had a wonderful holiday season. Happy New Year. We look forward to continuing to learn and grow with you in the new year, again, we'll get a list of books for the next 12 months for you. We invite you to join us for that. We invite you to join us every week. If there's a topic you would like for us to cover, please reach out, let us know. We would like to cover that for you. If you're interested in it, someone else is probably interested in it as well. If you are watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that every time we have a new episode, you get notified. And like and comment, right? Whether if you're watching on a replay, you can leave a comment there as well. So with that, again, we want to thank you. It's been a great year. Few challenges, right, on the personal side that have impacted the way we have moved in our businesses, but it's all learning, it's all growth, and what we learn, we share with you. And so, again, thank you for being a part of the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond family. We look forward to being with you in the new year. So it's been a good one.
It has been. It has been. It's been
a good one.
Yeah, great learning experience.
Absolutely. So see you next year and take care.
Bye now.